A pregnant German shepherd was thrown alive into a dumpster, fighting to survive. But a baby's reaction upon lifting the lid was simply unbelievable. Subscribe to the channel and hit that bell to follow more heartfelt stories like this. Since being forced to downsize to a small apartment on the outskirts of Clearwater Springs, Colorado, retired animal caretaker Martha Wilson had been living with fewer resources, but certainly not with less heart. At 68, her weathered hands told stories of countless rescues and rehabilitations during her 30-year career at the local animal shelter. The cramped one-bedroom apartment was a far cry from her previous farmhouse, but the economic downturn had left her with little choice after her husband's medical bills depleted their savings. Martha's days followed a simple rhythm now, marked by visits with her small circle of neighbors, women her age who exchanged recipes, memories, and smiles over coffee. But her greatest joy came from spending time with her 2-year-old grandson, Sammy, teaching him about respect, care, and empathy for animals. The boy, with his curious eyes and ready smile, was fascinated by any creature that walked on 4 legs. "Gamma, look!" Sammy would exclaim whenever they spotted a squirrel or a neighborhood cat during their daily walks. His tiny fingers would point excitedly, and Martha would patiently explain the importance of being gentle and kind to all living things. On a particularly muggy September morning, as they returned from the farmer's market with a small bag of apples and some fresh bread, Sammy tugged at Martha's hand, pulling her toward the vacant lot at the end of the street. What seemed like a child's whim revealed itself as something more, an instinctive call that Martha, with her decades of experience with animals in distress, recognized immediately. "What is it, sweetheart?" she asked, allowing herself to be led by the determined toddler. The vacant lot had once been the site of a small hardware store before it was demolished last spring. Now it sat empty, waiting for the new development that had been postponed indefinitely. Among the debris and construction waste, something caught Martha's attention, a metal container sealed shut with faint sounds coming from inside. Her heart raced, the protector's instinct awakening within her. Years of working with abandoned animals had taught her to recognize the signs of distress, even when they were barely perceptible. "Stay back a bit, Sammy," she cautioned, as she approached the container. It looked like the kind used for storing tools at construction sites, roughly 6 feet long and 4 feet high. The padlock on it was unlocked, suggesting it had been hastily secured. With cautious hands, Martha lifted the heavy lid. A strong smell of dust and abandonment mixed with the faint, desperate sound of labored breathing. There, among pieces of brick and bags of cement, lay a German shepherd, dirty, debilitated, and visibly pregnant. Her eyes were open, but hope seemed buried along with the rubble that had nearly suffocated her. Sammy didn't recoil, as most children his age might. Instead, he knelt down, looked into the animal's eyes, and extended his hand with the same gentleness he showed when offering cookies to Mrs. Jenkins' poodle next door. At that moment, the shepherd's belly moved. Life, still insistent, pulsed within her. "Oh, dear God," Martha whispered, her hand covering her mouth. The dog couldn't have been in the container for more than a day or two, but she was clearly dehydrated and frightened. More concerning was her condition. Martha estimated she was days, maybe hours away from giving birth. Without cell phone service in the lot, Martha knew she needed to act quickly. "Sammy, honey, we need to go get help. This mama dog needs us." "Always." But Sammy shook his head firmly. "No, leave her, Gamma. She's scared." His limited vocabulary conveyed a wisdom beyond his years. Martha knew he was right. The dog needed immediate assistance, and leaving her alone again could worsen her already fragile state. "Okay, sweetie, you stay right here where I can see you. I'm going to run to Mrs. Thompson's house. She's right there, see?" Martha pointed to the small yellow house at the edge of the lot. "I'll wave to you from her porch, and I'll be right back." Ellen Thompson was a retired nurse and one of Martha's closest friends in the apartment complex. If anyone would know what to do in an emergency, it would be Ellen. Martha hurried as fast as her arthritic knees would allow, constantly looking back to check on Sammy, who sat dutifully next to the container, his small hand resting on the edge where the dog could sense his presence. Ellen answered on the second knock, her silver hair pulled back in a neat bun, reading glasses perched on her nose. "Martha, is everything all right? You look—" "We found a dog, Ellen. A pregnant German Shepherd abandoned in a container in the vacant lot. She's in bad shape and I think she's about to give birth. Can you help?" Ellen's professional demeanor took over immediately. "Let me get my kit. Call Doris and Ruth. They're in the building. Doris has that old station wagon. We'll need it to transport her." Within 15 minutes, what had begun as a simple walk home from the market had transformed into an impromptu community rescue operation. Ellen arrived at the container with a medical bag and a determined expression. Doris Miller, a robust 70-year-old former physical education teacher, followed with a large wool blanket. Ruth Chen, the quietest of the group, but always reliable, in a crisis brought water and some leftover chicken from her lunch. "Lord have mercy," Ellen whispered when she saw the dog's condition. Who would do such a thing? Martha had seen many cases of animal abandonment during her career, but this calculated cruelty, sealing a pregnant dog in a container, struck her as particularly heartless. "I don't know, but right now that doesn't matter. We need to get her somewhere safe." Together, the four women created a makeshift stretcher from the blanket. With careful movements, Ellen directing, Doris and Martha lifting, Ruth keeping Sammy occupied, they managed to move the German Shepherd from the container to the blanket. The dog whimpered but didn't resist, as if understanding these humans meant no harm. "My garage," Ellen offered. "It's clean, and I have those old cushions from when my grandkids visited last summer. We can make her a comfortable spot there." Doris pulled her station wagon as close to the lot as possible. "Been a while since I've had four-legged passengers," she joked, trying to lighten the mood as they carefully lifted the blanket with the Shepherd onto the back seat. Martha and Sammy squeezed in beside her, with Martha gently stroking the dog's head. "You're safe now, girl," Martha whispered. "We've got you." The short drive to Ellen's apartment building felt endless. The dog's breathing became more labored, and Martha recognized the early signs of labor. She exchanged worried glances with Ellen, who sat in the front passenger seat, periodically turning to check on their patient. "The nearest emergency vet is in Denver," Ellen said quietly. "That's an hour away, at least. And today being Sunday." Martha nodded grimly. Small towns like Clearwater Springs had limited veterinary services, especially on weekends. The local vet, Dr. Harrison, wouldn't be back until Monday morning. As they pulled into the parking lot of their apartment complex, several residents looked on curiously. News traveled fast in small communities. By the time they had carefully carried the dog into Ellen's garage, 3 more neighbors had arrived offering help. Blankets, pet food, even an old dog bed that had belonged to a beloved companion long gone. Ellen's garage, normally neat and organized with potted plants hanging from the ceiling and carefully labeled storage bins along the walls, was quickly transformed into an emergency animal care unit. The German Shepherd was settled onto the makeshift bed, clean water placed within reach, a small amount of chicken offered as nourishment. Sammy, throughout it all, remained surprisingly calm. He sat cross-legged near the dog's head, not touching, her butt maintaining a silent vigil that seemed to comfort the animal. His usual energetic demeanor had been replaced by a solemn responsibility that made Martha's heart swell with pride and emotion. "What do we do now?" Ruth asked, voicing the question on everyone's mind. "We wait," Martha replied, drawing on years of experience. "She's going to have those puppies soon, whether we're ready or not. Ellen, do you still have those clean towels from your nursing days?" Ellen nodded. "And my first aid kit. I've assisted with human births, but never puppies." The principle is the same, Martha assured her, though her own experience with canine births had been limited to just 3 instances during her time at the shelter. Nature knows what to do. We just need to be here to help if something goes wrong. As the afternoon sun cast long shadows through the garage windows, the small group of unlikely midwives prepared for what would be a night none of them would soon forget. The pregnant German shepherd, now cleaned and somewhat comforted, looked at each of them with eyes that seemed to express both gratitude and apprehension. But it was to Sammy that she turned most often, as if sensing the pure, uncomplicated compassion that only a child could offer. When he finally reached out to touch her head, she didn't flinch or pull away. Instead, she leaned slightly into his small palm. "You're not alone," Sammy said softly, repeating words he had heard his grandmother use countless times when approaching frightened animals. "You not alone anymore." And in that moment, surrounded by strangers who had become instant allies, the abandoned dog seemed to believe him. As evening descended on Clearwater Springs, Ellen's garage became an unlikely birthing center. The women had created a comfortable space for the German Shepherd, with soft blankets forming a nest-like area. Doris had retrieved a space heater from her apartment to keep the temperature comfortable as the Colorado autumn night grew chiller. Ruth had taken charge of Sammy, preparing him a small dinner of peanut butter sandwiches and apple slices, though the boy showed little interest in food. His attention remained fixed on the dog, whose labored breathing had become more pronounced. "She's going to start soon," Martha said, her experienced eyes noting the subtle changes in the animal's behavior. "Ellen, can you bring those clean towels closer and maybe some warm water in a basin?" Ellen nodded, moving with the efficiency of someone who had spent decades in emergency rooms. Though she had retired 5 years ago, her nurse's instincts remained sharp. "Should we try calling that veterinary student again, the one Ruth's daughter knows?" Martha shook her head. "He's still an hour away, and I don't think we have that much time. Besides, I've assisted with dog births before, not many, but enough to know the basics." As if confirming Martha's assessment, the German Shepherd let out a low whine and shifted position, her muscular body tensing visibly. The first signs of active labor had begun. Doris, who had raised hunting dogs with her late husband, took a position near the dog's head, speaking in low, soothing tones. "That's right, Mama. You're doing just fine. We're all here for you." Martha positioned herself where she could assist if needed, with Ellen at her side, ready to hand her clean towels. Ruth kept Sammy occupied, but close enough to see what was happening, explaining in simple terms that the dog was about to have babies, like Mrs. Carson's cat had kittens. Sammy asked, his eyes wide with wonder. "Just like that, honey," Ruth confirmed with a gentle smile. "Only these will be puppies." The first puppy arrived just after 7 in the evening, with minimal assistance needed from Martha. The tiny, wet bundle emerged into the world, with a chorus of gasps from the women. Ellen handed Martha a clean towel, and she gently wiped the membrane from the puppy's face, stimulating it to take its first breath. "It's a girl," Martha announced, as the puppy let out a surprisingly robust squeak. She placed the newborn near her mother's face, allowing the German Shepherd to clean and bond with her offspring before helping the pup find its way to nurse. The second and third puppies followed relatively quickly, both males, both healthy and vigorous. By now, Sammy had moved closer, sitting cross-legged beside Doris, watching the miracle of birth with an innocence and acceptance that touched all the women present. "They're so little," he whispered in awe as the fourth puppy, another female, joined. "Her siblings. They'll grow fast," Martha assured him, her hands now stained with the effort of her gentle assistance. "Before you know it, they'll be running and playing." The fifth puppy presented more difficulty. The German Shepherd seemed to tire, her contractions weakening. Martha exchanged a worried glance with Ellen, who immediately understood the concern. "She's exhausted," Ellen murmured, and possibly dehydrated from being in that container. Martha nodded grimly. We might need to help a bit more with this one. What followed was a tense 20 minutes as Martha carefully assisted the struggling mother, drawing on every bit of knowledge she'd gained during her years at the shelter. Ellen supported her with quiet efficiency, anticipating needs before they were voiced. Finally, with a combination of skilled hands and encouraging words, the fifth puppy, the smallest of the litter, made its way into the world. Unlike its siblings, it didn't immediately cry out. "Come on, little one," Martha whispered, rubbing the tiny body more vigorously than she had the others. "Join the party." Sammy, who had been watching intently, suddenly reached out his small hand toward the puppy. "Wake up, baby doggy," he said with the simple directness of a child. "Your mommy needs you." Whether it was the continued stimulation from Martha's experienced hands or the innocent command from Sammy, the puppy suddenly gasped and let out a weak cry. A collective sigh of relief filled the garage. "That's it," Martha said, her voice thick with emotion as she placed the smallest pup, another male, near its mother's head. The German Shepherd, despite her exhaustion, immediately began to clean and nurture the fragile newcomer. "Is that all of them?" Ruth asked, bringing a fresh bowl of water for the new mother. Martha carefully examined the dog's abdomen. "I think so. 5 beautiful puppies, 3 boys and 2 girls." As if understanding she was being discussed, the German Shepherd looked up at Martha, then at each of the women in turn. Her gaze lingered longest on Sammy, who had remained remarkably patient and calm throughout the entire process. Then, in a gesture that brought tears to more than one pair of eyes, she gently nudged the smallest puppy closer to where Sammy sat. "I think she's thanking you, sweetheart," Martha said softly. "You helped save her and her babies." Sammy beamed with pride, but remained surprisingly subdued. "Can I touch him?" he asked, looking to his grandmother for permission. "Very gently," Martha instructed, "like touching a bubble." With exquisite care, Sammy stroked one finger along the smallest puppy's back. "Hi, tiny doggy," he whispered. "I'm Sammy." The impromptu birthing team stayed with the new mother and her puppies well into the night, taking turns to ensure all was well. Ellen's garage, usually so neat and organized, now bore witness to the beautiful chaos of new life. Empty water, bowls, used towels, and the remnants of a hasty dinner created a scene of domestic disorder that contrasted sharply with the peaceful tableau of the German Shepherd nursing her puppies. Around midnight, with the new mother finally resting comfortably and all 5 puppies nursing successfully, Martha realized Sammy had fallen asleep against Doris's shoulder. The elderly woman cradled the boy with the same tenderness she had shown the puppies. "I should get him home to bed," Martha said, reluctant to leave but aware of her responsibilities. "Will you be okay watching over them for a few hours, Ellen?" "I can come back first thing in the morning." Ellen nodded. "Go on. Ruth is staying over in my guest room anyway, and we've got a baby monitor set up. If anything changes, we'll call you immediately." Martha carefully took her sleeping grandson from Doris's arms. "Thank you all," she said, her voice catching. "I don't know what would have happened if—" "Don't even think about it," Doris interrupted firmly. "This is what neighbors do. Now go get some rest. Tomorrow we'll need to figure out next steps." As Martha carried Sammy back to their small apartment, the weight of the day's events settled on her shoulders. The joy of the successful births mingled with concern for the future. Where had the German Shepherd come from? Who had abandoned her in such a cruel manner? And what would happen to her and her puppies now? The cramped one-bedroom apartment felt especially small as Martha gently tucked Sammy into his trundle bed. She couldn't take in 6 dogs. Her lease specifically prohibited pets of any kind. Ellen was in the same situation, as were most of the seniors in their affordable housing complex. "We'll figure it out," she whispered to herself as she settled into her own bed. one day at a time. Sleep came reluctantly, interrupted by vivid dreams of her days at the shelter, the countless animals she had helped, the difficult decisions, the rare but precious moments of perfect connection between human and animal. In one particularly vivid dream, she saw Sammy grown tall, working alongside her in a bright, sunlit space filled with wagging tails and grateful eyes. Martha awoke before dawn, her body aching from the previous day's exertions, but her mind clear, with purpose. After checking on Sammy, who still slept soundly, she made a quick cup of coffee and jotted down a list of people to contact: Dr. Harrison, the local veterinarian, her former colleagues at the regional animal shelter, even Pastor Mike, whose congregation often rallied around community needs. By the time Sammy stirred, rubbing sleep from his eyes and immediately asking about his dogs, Martha had a plan forming. It wasn't perfect, and it depended on the goodwill of others, but it was a start. "Are the puppies okay, Gamma?" Sammy asked as she helped him dress for the day. "Yes, sweetheart. Mrs. Thompson and Mrs. Chen watched over them all night. We're going to go see them right after breakfast. And the mommy dog, is she still sad?" Martha paused, struck by her grandson's perceptiveness. The German Shepherd had indeed seemed not just physically exhausted, but emotionally depleted, like an animal who had known kindness once and then suffered betrayal. "I think she's feeling better," Martha answered carefully, "but she might be sad for a while. Sometimes it takes time to feel happy again when sad things happen." Sammy considered this with the seriousness only a toddler could muster. "I can help her be happy," he declared finally. "I'm good at that." Martha smiled, her heart swelling with pride and something else, a tentative hope that perhaps this unexpected turn of events might lead somewhere meaningful. "Yes, you are, Sammy. You certainly are." After a quick breakfast of cereal and bananas, they made their way back to Ellen's garage. The scene that greeted them was one of domestic tranquility. Ellen and Ruth sat in folding chairs, sipping coffee and speaking in hushed tones, while Doris was nowhere to be seen. The German Shepherd lay in her makeshift bed, all 5 puppies nestled against her, nursing contentedly. "How is our patient this morning?" Martha asked, keeping her voice low. Ellen smiled. "Much better. She ate a little chicken and drank plenty of water." Doris went home to shower and then to the store for proper dog food. "And," she added with a meaningful look at Martha, "Dr. Harrison called back. He's coming by around 9. Relief washed over Martha. The local vet was known for his compassion as much as his skill. If anyone could help navigate this situation, it would be James Harrison. Sammy immediately went to sit near the German Shepherd, maintaining a respectful distance, but clearly eager to be close to the puppies. To everyone's surprise, the dog shifted slightly, creating a space beside her as if inviting the boy closer. "May I?" Sammy asked, looking at his grandmother. "If you're very gentle," Martha cautioned. "Remember, the puppies are still brand new." With the solemnity of someone approaching a sacred space, Sammy scooted closer until he was sitting right beside the new mother. The German Shepherd lifted her head to sniff him, then, apparently satisfied, rested her muzzle on his knee. "She remembers you," Ruth observed quietly. "Dogs are smarter than most people give them credit for." "She knows who her friends are," Martha agreed, watching as Sammy began to softly stroke the dog's head, his tiny fingers careful and deliberate. "We still don't know where she came from," Ellen said, keeping her voice low, "or who would do such a thing to her." Martha's face hardened momentarily. "I have some theories. In my years at the shelter, I saw all kinds of cruelty. But that's a conversation for another time," she added, with a meaningful glance toward Sammy. The boy seemed oblivious to the adults' discussion, lost in his own world with the German Shepherd and her puppies. "You're a good mommy," he was telling her, "and your babies are so pretty. Don't worry, We'll take care of you. His childish promise, made with such certainty and innocence, brought a lump to Martha's throat. If only it were that simple. But even as she worried about the practical challenges ahead, she couldn't help feeling that something important had begun in that garage. Something that transcended the immediate crisis of an abandoned dog and her puppies. It was as if, in saving this one family of animals, they had tapped into something essential about community, compassion, and connection. Qualities that seemed increasingly rare in the fast-paced, often indifferent world beyond their small town. Dr. James Harrison arrived precisely at 9, his weathered pickup truck announcing his presence with a familiar rumble. At 65, he was Clearwater Springs' only veterinarian and had been for nearly 4 decades. His practice had grown from a single-room office to a respectable clinic, but he still made house calls when needed, especially for Martha Wilson, whose dedication to animals had earned his deep respect during her years at the shelter. "Quite the welcoming committee," he remarked good-naturedly, as he navigated through the small crowd that had gathered outside Ellen's garage. Word had spread quickly through the apartment complex, and neighbors had been stopping by all morning, some offering help, others simply curious about the unexpected drama. Inside, Dr. Harrison's jovial demeanor shifted to professional focus as he knelt beside the German Shepherd. "Hello there, Mama," he said softly, allowing the dog to sniff his hand before he began his examination. "You've had quite an adventure, haven't you?" The dog regarded him warily but didn't growl or show signs of aggression. A good sign, Martha thought, that she had been socialized properly at some point in her life. This wasn't a stray or feral animal, this was someone's pet. "She's underweight and dehydrated," Dr. Harrison confirmed after a thorough examination. "But considering what she's been through, she's in remarkably good condition." He moved on to check each puppy, his large hands surprisingly gentle as he examined the tiny creatures. "And these little ones seem healthy too, though this smallest fellow might need some extra attention." Sammy, who had reluctantly moved aside to give the veterinarian space, piped up, "That's my puppy. I helped him wake up." Dr. Harrison glanced at Martha, who nodded confirmation. "Well, young man, you did a fine job. He's small but fighting." As the veterinarian administered fluids and vitamins to the mother dog, Martha pulled him aside. "James, what happens now? None of us can keep them long-term. Our leases—" Dr. Harrison stroked his salt and pepper beard thoughtfully. "The shelter's at capacity, as usual, but let me make some egg holes. We might be able to find a foster situation until the puppies are weaned. Then adoption becomes an option." The word adoption sent a pang through Martha's heart. After years of facilitating adoptions at the shelter, she knew the process. Well, the joy of perfect matches, but also the heartbreak of separations, of animals waiting too long for homes, of promising situations that fell through. Sammy had already formed an attachment to these dogs, particularly the runt of the litter. How would she explain when they had to go? "There's something else," Martha continued, lowering her voice further. "The container. It was deliberately sealed, James. This wasn't an accident or a case of a stray finding shelter. Someone put her there." The veterinarian's expression darkened. "Have you reported it?" "Not yet. Ellen thought we should focus on the birth first, but I'm going to call Sheriff Davis this morning." "Good. Animal cruelty is a serious offense." Dr. Harrison packed his supplies back into his medical bag. "I'll stop by again tomorrow to check on them. Meanwhile, I've left enough medication for 3 days. Ellen knows the schedule?" Martha nodded. She was a nurse for 30 years. "I think she can handle canine medication." After the veterinarian left, the day took on a rhythm of its own. Ellen's garage became command central for what was quickly becoming a community operation. Doris organized a schedule for volunteers willing to take shifts watching over the dogs. Ruth, whose quiet efficiency masked a talent for organization, created a spreadsheet of needed supplies and circulated it among neighbors. Even the usually reserved Mr. Patel from apartment 3B contributed, arriving mid-morning with several gently used blankets and a large bag of premium dog food. "My sister's Labrador had puppies last year," he explained with a shy smile. "This was left over. I've been meaning to donate it somewhere." By noon, Martha had made the necessary call to Sheriff Davis, who promised to send Deputy Jenkins to take a statement. She had also reached out to her former colleagues at the regional animal shelter, explaining the situation and inquiring about fostering options. "The earliest we could take them would be next week," Linda, the intake coordinator, had told her, apologetically, "and even then it would be tight. Kitten season hit us hard this year." "I understand," Martha had responded, knowing all too well the challenges of shelter management. "We'll manage until then." As she hung up, Martha caught sight of Sammy sitting cross-legged beside the German Shepherd, talking to her in the earnest, disjointed way of toddlers. The dog listened attentively, her amber eyes fixed on the boy's animated face. "And then, we can play ball," Sammy was saying, "when your babies get bigger, and you can come live with me and Gamma." Martha's heart constricted. How could she make him understand the realities of their situation? Their apartment was barely big enough for the two of them, let alone 6 dogs, and the lease terms were explicit. No pets allowed, with eviction as the consequence for violations. "Sammy, honey," she began gently, sitting down beside him, "we need to talk about the dogs." Before she could continue, Ellen appeared at the garage door, waving to catch Martha's attention. "There's someone here you should meet," she said, her tone suggesting something significant. Martha stood, curious. "Can you stay with Sammy for a minute?" she asked Ruth, who nodded and moved to take her place beside the boy. Following Ellen out to the apartment complex's courtyard, Martha found herself face to face with a young woman she didn't recognize. In her late 20s, perhaps, with auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail and eyes reddened from what appeared to be recent tears. "Martha, this is Allison Reed," Ellen introduced them. She saw the post on the community forum. Martha extended her hand, confused. "Post? What post?" Ellen had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. "Ruth's granddaughter helped us create a post last night about the rescued dog and puppies, just to see if anyone might be able to help with supplies or fostering. She has quite a following on social media, apparently." "And I saw it this morning," Allison interjected, her voice trembling slightly. "The German Shepherd. Is it possible for me to see her?" Something in the young woman's intensity made Martha cautious. "May I ask why you're interested?" Allison pulled out her phone, fingers shaking as she navigated to her photo gallery. "Because I think she might be mine. My Dakota went missing 3 weeks ago from our property just outside of Boulder." Boulder was nearly 30 miles away. Martha's eyebrows rose in surprise. "That's quite a distance." "I know," Allison's voice cracked. "She disappeared from our backyard. My boyfriend and I have been searching everywhere, putting up flyers, checking shelters. She's microchipped, but no one's reported finding her. When I saw the post with the picture of a pregnant German Shepherd found in Clearwater Springs, I had to come see. Dakota was pregnant when she disappeared." Martha studied the phone Allison held out. The screen showed a healthy, vibrant German Shepherd with distinctive markings, a white blaze on her chest, and an unusual pattern of tan on her face. The same markings Martha had noticed on their rescued dog. "Follow me," Martha said, a mix of emotions swirling within her. If this was indeed Allison's dog, it would solve the immediate problem of finding the animals a home. But it would also mean explaining to Sammy that his new friends would be leaving. And it raised even more questions about how Dakota had ended up in that container 30 miles from home. As they entered the garage, the German Shepherd lifted her head alertly. Allison gasped, hand flying to her mouth. "Dakota!" she whispered, tears immediately spilling down her cheeks. The dog's reaction was unmistakable. Her tail thumped weakly against the blankets, and a small whine escaped her throat. This was recognition, the kind that couldn't be faked or mistaken. "Oh my God, it's really her," Allison cried, rushing forward to kneel beside the dog. Dakota strained to lick her face, tail wagging more vigorously now, despite her weakened state. "What happened to you, girl? Where have you been?" Sammy watched this reunion with confusion written across his small features. "Who's that lady, Gamma?" he asked, moving to stand beside Martha. Martha placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "That's Miss Allison, sweetheart. It looks like she might be the mummy dog's owner." Sammy's brow furrowed. "But we found her. She's our dog now." The simple, childish logic was heartbreaking in its innocence. "Remember how sad you were when you lost your teddy bear at the park?" Martha asked, kneeling to his level. "And how happy you were when Mrs. Jenkins found it and brought it back to you? Miss Allison has been very sad because she lost her dog. Now she's happy because we found Dakota and took good care of her." The boy seemed to struggle with this concept, his gaze moving between the joyful reunion happening on the blankets and his grandmother's earnest face. "But what about the puppies?" he asked finally. "Who's going to take care of them?" It was Allison who answered, having overheard the exchange. She looked up, her face streaked with tears but radiant with happiness. "They're Dakota's puppies, so they're my puppies too. I'll take care of all of them, I promise." Sammy didn't appear entirely convinced. He moved closer to the smallest puppy, the one he had helped wake up after its difficult birth. "Even this one, he's special." Allison's expression softened as she took in the protective stance of the small boy. "He is special, isn't he? You know, taking care of 6 dogs is a really big job. Maybe I could use some help with that one." Martha recognized what Allison was offering, not just gratitude, but a genuine connection, a way to honor the bond that had formed between Sammy and the puppies. Before she could respond, however, Deputy Jenkins arrived, his official presence temporarily shifting the focus of attention. The questioning was straightforward. Martha recounted finding Dakota in the container, careful to keep her description factual and unemotional despite the anger she still felt at whoever had committed such an act. Ellen and Ruth provided supporting details, while Doris, who had returned from another supply run, added her observations about the container itself. Clearly deliberate, the deputy concluded, making notes in his official pad. The container had no air holes, and the location wasn't one where people regularly walk by. If your grandson hadn't led you there, Mrs. Wilson. "But he did," Martha interrupted firmly, unwilling to consider the alternative outcome. "And now, we need to find out who's responsible." Deputy Jenkins nodded. "The container might yield some fingerprints, and we'll check if there are any security cameras in the vicinity. Construction sites sometimes install them to prevent theft of materials." While the adults discussed the investigation, Sammy had returned to his place beside Dakota and her puppies. Allison, showing remarkable sensitivity to the boy's attachment, had invited him to help her count the puppy's toes and tell her all about their birth. "And then, the tiny one wouldn't wake up," Sammy was explaining solemnly. "But I told him. His mommy needed him and he did." "You helped save his life," Allison told him, her voice warm with genuine admiration. "That was very brave and very kind." The boy beamed under her praise, his initial wariness fading. "Can I visit him sometimes? When he gets bigger?" "Of course. You can," Allison assured him. "In fact, I was thinking, when the puppies are old enough, they'll need names. Would you like to name this special one?" Sammy's eyes widened with delight. "Really? I can name him?" "Absolutely. He's alive because of you. I think that gives you naming rights." Martha watched this exchange with a mixture of gratitude and melancholy. Allison was handling the situation with remarkable grace and empathy. Yet there was still something troubling about the whole scenario. How had Dakota ended up 30 miles from home, locked in a container? As if reading her thoughts, Allison approached Martha while Sammy continued his one-sided conversation with the puppies. "I can't thank you enough," she began, voice thick with emotion. "If you hadn't found her, if your grandson hadn't—" "We're just glad it turned out this way," Martha assured her. "But I have to ask, do you have any idea how Dakota ended up here? Boulder isn't exactly around the corner." Allison's expression clouded. "That's what I can't figure out. Our yard is fenced, and Dakota doesn't wander. She's always been good about staying home." She hesitated, then added in a lower voice, "There was some trouble a few weeks before she disappeared. A neighbor was angry because Dakota barked at his new construction equipment. There were words exchanged. My boyfriend, Jeff, confronted him about threatening to call animal control on Dakota." What kind of construction equipment?" Martha asked, a suspicion beginning to form. "He's a contractor, has his own business renovating houses. Reynolds Construction, I think it's called." Martha and Ellen exchanged meaningful glances. "Does he work in this area?" "I don't know for sure," Allison admitted. "Jeff might know more. He should be here soon. He's driving over from work." The pieces were beginning to align in Martha's mind, forming a picture she didn't like. A contractor with a grudge against Dakota, construction equipment that could easily include a storage container, work that might bring him to Clearwater Springs. It was circumstantial at best, but it deserved investigation. Before she could share her thoughts with Deputy Jenkins, who was still interviewing Doris near the entrance to the garage, another visitor arrived. A tall, athletic man in his early 30s, wearing jeans and a polo shirt with a company logo Martha couldn't quite make out from a distance. "Allie?" he called, scanning the crowded garage until his eyes found Allison. "You found her? You really found Dakota?" Allison's face lit up. "Jeff, yes, she's here, and she had her puppies, 5 of them, all healthy." As Jeff made his way through the small gathering to join Allison beside Dakota, Martha noticed something odd in the German Shepherd's reaction. While she had greeted Allison with unambiguous joy, her response to Jeff was decidedly more reserved. Her tail, which had wagged enthusiastically for her owner, remained still, and though she didn't growl, her body language shifted subtly, a tension that hadn't been present before. Dogs, Martha knew from decades of experience, were excellent judges of character and retained strong memories of both kindness and cruelty. Dakota's reaction to Jeff wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't the greeting one would expect for a beloved family member either. It was a small detail, one that might have gone unnoticed by someone less attuned to canine behavior, but to Martha, it raised a warning flag, one she couldn't ignore, especially with Sammy still sitting trustingly beside the puppies, looking up at the newcomer with curious eyes. 5 puppies, Jeff marveled, kneeling beside Allison to get a better look at the newborns. That's amazing, and they all made it. Thanks to Mrs. Wilson and her grandson, Allison replied, her hand still stroking Dakota's head. They found her just in time. Martha observed the interaction carefully, noting not only Dakota's continued reserve around Jeff, but also something in the man's demeanor that struck her as off. A tension in his shoulders, a forced quality to his smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "It's fortunate you saw Ruth's post," Martha said, addressing Allison but watching Jeff's reaction. "Dakota was in pretty bad shape when we found her. Whoever put her in that container knew what they were doing." Jeff's head snapped up, his expression shifting from admiration of the puppies to something harder. "Container? What container?" "A metal storage container," Ellen explained, having approached to join the conversation. "In the vacant lot at the end of our street, someone had sealed her inside. If Martha and Sammy hadn't found her..." That's horrible," Jeff stammered, his complexion paling slightly. "Who would do something like that?" Deputy Jenkins, who had been quietly observing from a few feet away, stepped forward. "That's what we're trying to determine, sir. I understand you and Ms. Reed live in Boulder." "That's right." Jeff stood up, brushing dust from his jeans in a gesture that seemed more nervous than practical. "I'm Jeff Bryce. Allison and I have been together for 3 years." "And you both own Dakota?" The deputy continued, his tone conversational but his eyes shrewd. "Dakota is technically mine," Allison clarified. "I've had her since she was a puppy, before Jeff and I started dating. But we live together now, so she's part of our family." She smiled up at Jeff, who returned the expression with less enthusiasm than Martha thought appropriate for the reunion. "Ms. Reed mentioned that Dakota disappeared from your backyard," Deputy Jenkins continued. "Any idea how that might have happened?" Jeff shrugged, his posture becoming more defensive. "The gate might have been left open. We've had workers coming and going, doing some landscaping." "Any security cameras that might have captured something?" the deputy pressed. "No, nothing like that." Jeff's responses were becoming shorter, his discomfort more evident. Martha decided to take a more direct approach. "Allison mentioned a dispute with a neighbor, someone in construction who threatened Dakota." The change in Jeff's expression was subtle, but unmistakable. A flash of something like panic quickly masked by indignation. "There was nothing, just a misunderstanding. Guy was being a jerk about Dakota barking." "Reynolds Construction, right?" Martha continued, watching his reaction carefully. "Do they work in Clearwater Springs at all?" Before Jeff could answer, Dammy's voice piped up from his position beside the puppies. "That's on the truck, I saw it." He pointed toward the parking lot visible through the garage door. All eyes followed his gesture to where a white pickup truck was parked, a pickup with Reynolds Construction emblazoned on its side in bold blue lettering. The silence that followed was pregnant with realization. Deputy Jenkins was the first to break it, his hand moving instinctively toward his holster, though he didn't draw his weapon. "Sir, is that your vehicle?" Jeff's face had lost all color now. "I can explain." "You work for Reynolds Construction?" Allison interrupted, confusion and the beginning of horror dawning on her face. "Since when? You told me you were at Mountain View Development." "It's a recent change," Jeff muttered, not meeting her eyes. "Look, this isn't what it seems like." "Why don't we continue this conversation at the station?" Deputy Jenkins suggested, though his tone made it clear this wasn't really a request. "I think we'd all be more comfortable there." As the implications settled over the group, Martha felt a surge of protective instinct. She moved closer to Sammy, placing herself between him and Jeff. Ellen and Doris did the same, forming an unconscious barrier around Dakota and her puppies. "I didn't hurt her," Jeff protested, his voice rising as he sensed the change in atmosphere. "You don't understand." "Jeff!" Allison's voice cut through his protestations, quiet but sharp with betrayal. "Did you have something to do with Dakota's disappearance?" The garage fell silent, all eyes on Jeff as he struggled visibly with some internal conflict. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. "It wasn't supposed to go like this. Bob, my boss, he said we'd just take her to the shelter in Denver, that's all. Just get her away from the neighborhood because of the complaints." Allison's gasp was like a physical blow. "You took my dog? You stole Dakota from our yard?" She wouldn't stop barking at the equipment. Jeff's composure was cracking now, excuses tumbling out. "Bob was going to lose the contract with the Hendersons if we couldn't work. He said it would just be for a few weeks until the major excavation was done. Then we'd find her at a shelter and everything would be fine." "Except that's not what happened, is it, Mr. Bryce?" Deputy Jenkins said, his professional demeanor firmly in place, though his disgust was evident. "The dog ended up in a sealed container 30 miles away." Jeff's shoulders slumped. "That wasn't me. I swear, I gave her to Bob. He said he had a friend with a farm who could keep her temporarily. I never thought. I didn't know he would." "You expect us to believe you had no idea your boss would abandon a pregnant dog in a container to die?" Martha couldn't contain her outrage any longer. That he would drive her 30 miles away and leave her without food or water. How stupid do you think we are? Sammy, sensing the tension, but not fully comprehending its cause, pressed closer to Dakota, his small hand protectively stroking the smallest puppy. The German Shepherd responded by shifting her body slightly, as if to shield both her offspring and the boy from the conflict. Perhaps we should continue this at the station, Deputy Jenkins repeated more firmly, stepping forward to take Jeff's arm. Mr. Bryce, you're not under arrest at this time, but I'd like you to come with me to make a formal statement. Ms. Reed, you're welcome to follow in your vehicle if you'd like to be present. Allison stood shakily, her face a mask of shock and betrayal. I'll stay here for... Now Dakota needs me and I can't even look at him right now. Her voice broke on the last words, tears streaming down her face. As Deputy Jenkins led a subdued Jeff from the garage, an uncomfortable silence descended on the remaining group. Martha knelt beside Allison, placing a comforting hand on the younger woman's shoulder. I'm so sorry, this must be devastating. Allison nodded, unable to speak through her tears. After a moment, she composed herself enough to address the gathering of concerned neighbors. I can't thank you all enough for what you've done for Dakota if you hadn't found her. But we did, Ellen interjected gently. And now she's safe with 5 beautiful puppies and her human, who clearly loves her very much. The practical matters that followed provided a welcome distraction from the emotional turmoil. Dr. Harrison, who had returned for a promised afternoon checkup, confirmed that Dakota and her puppies were stable enough to be transported. Not all the way to Boulder today, he cautioned. The stress wouldn't be good for any of them, but a shorter trip would be manageable if there's somewhere closer she could recuperate for a few days. Allison looked uncertain. I don't know anyone in Clearwater Springs. I could try to find a pet-friendly motel. Nonsense, came a new voice from the garage entrance. All heads turned to see Mrs. Jenkins, the owner of apartment 4C, and, more importantly, the building's landlady. The elderly woman had been observing the proceedings with interest for the past hour. The vacant ground floor apartment has been cleaned for new tenants, but they're not moving in until next week. It's small, but it has the basics. Water, electricity, a mattress on the floor. You're welcome to use it for a few days. Martha stared at her neighbor in surprise. Mrs. Jenkins was known for her strict adherence to the building's no pets policy. Barbara, that's incredibly generous, but the lease terms are my business, Mrs. Jenkins interrupted with a wave of her bejeweled hand. I've owned this building for 40 years, Martha. I think I can decide when to make an exception. The solution was ideal. With help from the assembled neighbors, Dakota and her puppies were carefully transported to the vacant apartment. Blankets, food, water, and makeshift bedding were arranged in the small living room. Dr. Harrison provided final instructions for their care, promising to check in again the following day. Throughout the move, Sammy remained close to the mother, dog and her litter, particularly the runt he had helped revive. His attachment was obvious to everyone, none more so than Allison, who watched the boy's gentle interactions with growing appreciation. As the excitement began to wane and neighbors drifted back to their own apartments, Martha found herself alone, with Allison, Sammy, and the dogs in the temporary shelter of apartment 1A. I should go to the station, Allison said finally, her voice steadier now but still thick with emotion. I need to know exactly what happened, what they did to her. Martha nodded in understanding. Of course, we can stay with Dakota if you'd like. Sammy and I don't have any plans for the rest of the day. Sammy, who had been listening to the adults' conversation while continuing his vigil beside the puppies, looked up eagerly. Can we gamma, please? Are you sure? Allison asked, gratitude evident in her tired eyes. You've already done so much. We're sure, Martha confirmed, settling herself on the floor beside her grandson. Take whatever time you need. We'll be here. After Allison left, the apartment fell into a peaceful quiet, broken only by the soft sounds of puppies nursing and Dakota's occasional contented sigh. Martha watched as Sammy spoke in whispers to the smallest puppy, his face a study in childlike wonder. "Have you thought of a name for him yet?" she asked gently. Sammy nodded, his expression serious. "I'm going to call him Hero." "Hero?" Martha repeated, surprised by the choice. "That's an unusual name for a puppy so small." "Mrs. Thompson says heroes come in all sizes," Sammy explained with the simple logic of childhood. "And he was brave when he was born, even though he's little." Martha felt her eyes grow moist at her grandson's reasoning. "That's a perfect name, sweetheart. I think he'll grow into it beautifully." As afternoon faded into evening, Allison returned, her face drawn but somehow more settled, as if having confronted difficult truths had brought its own kind of peace. "Jeff confessed everything," she said without preamble, sinking onto the mattress that had been prepared for her. "He and his boss, Robert Reynolds, took Dakota because she was interfering with their construction schedule. They were renovating the house next door to ours, and Dakota kept barking at their equipment. That's hardly a reason to steal someone's pet," Martha said, keeping her voice calm despite the anger she still felt. "No, it's not, but there's more." Allison ran a hand through her disheveled hair. The renovation project was already behind schedule and over budget. They were facing penalties if they delayed any further. Jeff admitted that Reynolds suggested they solve the problem by relocating Dakota temporarily. "But not to a shelter," Martha prompted, sensing there was more to the story. Allison's expression hardened. "No. Reynolds has a cousin who works in development here in Clearwater Springs. They were going to keep Dakota at his property until the Boulder project was completed. But when they realized she was pregnant and getting close to her due date, they decided she was too much trouble." Martha finished grimly. "Reynolds put her in one of their storage containers and drove her to that vacant lot. He claimed he left the container unlocked and thought she would find her way out." Allison's voice broke. "He said he didn't think it would, that she would." Martha reached across to squeeze the younger woman's hand. "But she didn't. She survived, and so did her puppies. That's what matters now." Sammy, who had been listening with the partial comprehension of a toddler, added his own conclusion. "The bad man put Dakota in the box, but we found her, and now she's okay." His simplification of the complex, ugly situation brought a wavering smile to Allison's face. "Yes, that's right, Sammy. Thanks to you and your grandmother, Dakota and her puppies are okay." As night fell on Clearwater Springs, the impromptu rescue operation transitioned into something more permanent. Dakota and her puppies were settled comfortably in their temporary home. Allison had made arrangements to stay with them, grateful for the unexpected kindness of strangers who had become allies in the span of a single day. Martha prepared to take Sammy home for the night, promising they would return first thing in the morning. The boy was reluctant to leave his new friends, particularly the puppy he had named Hero. "Will Hero remember me tomorrow?" he asked anxiously as Martha helped him into his jacket. "Of course he will," Allison assured him, kneeling to the child's level. "You're his special person. He won't forget you." The phrase "special person" lingered in Martha's mind as she and Sammy walked the short distance back to their own apartment. In her decades working with animals, she had witnessed countless bonds form between humans and pets, some immediate and profound, others growing steadily over time. What she had seen between her grandson and the smallest puppy was of the first kind, a connection that transcended explanation. Yet practical realities remained. Their lease forbade pets. Their apartment was too small. Their budget, already stretched thin, couldn't accommodate the expenses of dog ownership. Mrs. Jenkins' tolerance for Dakota and her puppies was a temporary measure born of extraordinary circumstances. It didn't signal a permanent change in policy. As she tucked Sammy into bed that night, Martha found herself facing a dilemma she hadn't anticipated when they set out for the farmer's market the previous morning. How could she protect her grandson from the inevitable heartbreak of separation from Hero while honoring the remarkable bond that had formed between them? The answer, when it came to her in the quiet darkness of her bedroom, was both obvious and terrifying in its implications. It would require courage, initiative, and a willingness to reimagine the comfortable routine she had established since her retirement. But as she considered the joy in Sammy's eyes when he held Hero and the renewed sense of purpose she herself had felt during the rescue, Martha knew what she had to do. Sleep came easier that night than she had expected, her mind settled by the beginnings of a plan that would take shape in the days to come, a plan that would change not just her life and Sammy's, but possibly the lives of many animals in need in Clearwater Springs. The next 2 weeks transformed Martha and Sammy's lives and touched the entire community of Clearwater Springs. What began as a simple rescue had evolved into something much larger, a vision for the town's first animal rescue center. Martha's idea, born from her desire to keep Sammy connected to Hero, had quickly gained momentum. After a meeting with Pastor Mike, who enthusiastically supported her vision, Martha approached Mayor Collins with a proposal that surprised even herself. Clearwater Springs needs its own animal rescue center, Martha had told the mayor. I have 30 years of experience in animal care, and there are plenty of retirees in town with time to volunteer. As for location, she had taken a deep breath. The old Wilson property on Maple Street would be perfect. I'm prepared to lease it long-term at a nominal rate. Kium property had been in her husband's family for generations. Though financial necessity had forced Martha to downsize after James's illness, she had never been able to sell the homestead completely. Now, it could serve a new purpose. The community's response was overwhelming. Ellen volunteered to serve. As medical coordinator, Doris took on volunteer coordination, and Ruth handled public relations. Even Mrs. Jenkins, the strict landlady, revealed she had once been a champion show dog breeder and offered to designate certain apartment units as pet-friendly. Meanwhile, Dakota and her puppies thrived. Hero, the runt, had overcome his early challenges and developed a spunky personality. Dr. Harrison noted during a checkup, he's got heart, just like his young friend here, nodding towards Sammy, who spent every available moment with the puppies. Allison had become integral to the rescue center plans. I work remotely as a web designer, she told Martha one afternoon. There's no reason I couldn't do that from Clearwater Springs. This feels right, being part of something that might prevent what happened to Dakota from happening to others. Martha had a difficult conversation with Sammy about Hero eventually going home with Allison and Dakota. But Hero is my puppy, Sammy had protested, tears welling in his eyes. Hero belongs to Miss Allison, just like Dakota does, Martha explained, gently. But Miss Allison and I have been talking about a special arrangement. If the town council approved the rescue center proposal, Martha and Sammy would move back to the farmhouse by Christmas as caretakers for the Clearwater Springs Animal Rescue Center. You and I would live in the main part of the house, Martha had explained. And Miss Allison is moving here too. That means Dakota and Hero will be right there with us almost every day. Now, standing in the town hall as Mayor Collins called the council meeting to order, Martha felt both nervous and exhilarated. The room was packed with supporters: Ellen, Doris, Ruth, and most of the apartment complex residents. Allison sat in the front row with Dakota at her feet. Sammy, granted special permission to attend despite the late hour, sat between Doris and Ruth, occasionally waving to his grandmother. Good evening, Martha began as she approached the podium. 3 weeks ago, my grandson and I found an abandoned pregnant German Shepherd who, against all odds, delivered 5 healthy puppies. What began as a simple rescue has evolved into a recognition that our town needs a permanent solution for animals in crisis. She outlined the proposal for a phased approach, beginning with emergency care and temporary housing, eventually expanding to include educational programs and adoption services. The Wilson property offers an ideal location, Martha continued, showing slides of the farmhouse and outbuildings. As the current owner, I am prepared to enter into a long-term lease agreement at a nominal rate. Dr. Harrison and Sheriff Davis followed with presentations on the region's animal care needs and statistics on abandonment cases. When public comments began, community members rose one by one to express support. Mrs. Jenkins spoke about the therapeutic benefits pets provided to seniors. Pastor Mike emphasized moral responsibility toward vulnerable creatures. The most powerful testimony came from Sammy. Standing on tiptoes to reach the microphone, he delivered a message that captured everything Martha had been working toward. Hero was the littlest puppy, and he was very sick, Sammy stated clearly. But I told him he wasn't alone, and he got better. Gamma says lots of animals get sick or scared because they're alone. But if we make the rescue place, they won't be alone anymore. And that's important. The council's deliberation was brief. With a unanimous 7-0 vote, they approved the initial phase of the rescue center, allocating seed funding and authorizing the formation of a non-profit organization. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Allison approached Martha with a proposition. The puppies will be ready to leave Dakota in about 5 weeks, she began. I've already had inquiries from several good homes, but I've decided that Hero belongs with Sammy. Once you're settled at the farmhouse, I'd like him to live there permanently, with you and Sammy. Martha felt a rush of emotion. We would be honored, and I know a certain young man who will be over the moon. Let's make it a special surprise closer to when you move, Allison suggested. Maybe even a Christmas gift. As Martha carried a sleeping Sammy back to their apartment that night, her mind filled with images of the future. The farmhouse restored to purpose, the barn transformed into a haven for animals in need, and a small boy growing up surrounded by lessons of compassion and responsibility. At his side would be a German Shepherd pup named Hero, small in stature but mighty in impact. The journey had begun with a simple walk home, a curious toddler's insistence on investigating a strange container, and an abandoned dog's will to survive. It had expanded into a community-wide movement that would change countless lives, human and animal alike, for years to come. At 68, Martha Wilson wasn't ending her life's work. She was beginning a new chapter that would draw on everything she had learned, while opening doors to possibilities she had never imagined. And it had all started because a small boy with a big heart had recognized what too many adults forget, that no living creature should ever have to face its darkest moments alone. Dear listeners, we hope Martha and Sammy's journey has touched your hearts as deeply as it has touched ours. The power of compassion and community shown in Clearwater Springs reminds us that even the smallest actions can create ripples of change that transform lives, both human and animal. For more heartwarming stories like this one, we've prepared a special playlist of equally captivating narratives. Find it by clicking to your left. If you enjoyed following Martha, Sammy, and Hero's adventure, please subscribe to our channel and give this video a thumbs up. Every day, we bring you unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of life's unexpected moments. What part of this story moved you the most? Was it Sammy's connection with Hero, Martha's second chance at fulfilling her life's purpose, or the community coming together for a common cause? We can't wait to read your thoughts in the comments below.